In confinement. Sherry Lawson woke slowly, shivering not from the cold, but from the eerie sensation of a hand stroking the bare skin of her belly. She was slowly getting used to it, waking up as if in a fog, slowly remembering her horrible situation, checking to see if anything had changed. She checked to see if the blindfold was still on, afraid of what she might see if it was. Her muscles tensed, slowly reaching for her wrists and ankles, confirming once again that she was bound and helpless. The hand that ran over her belly was, as always, gentle, soft, and blister-free. Deceptive. "Good morning, sleepyhead. I have another surprise for you today." The voice was feminine, with notes of Midwestern colloquialism, too familiar. "Please, please, please let me go," Sherry begged for the 1,000th time. "At the right time. You know the terms of the deal. Be good, be obedient, be respectful. It will all be over soon if you play by my rules. If you don't, it will be over very soon, and I promise you won't like the ending." There was a steely note in her tone that left Sherry in no doubt as to what the alternative ending would be. "Yes, mistress," Sherry said quietly, flinching at the implied threat. His hand left her stomach, and she flinched when he stroked her cheek, running his fingertips over her lips. "What a good girl. You're learning. Perhaps this morning will do without a lesson in discipline. It would be a shame to punish you. Today is a fun day." Sherry shuddered involuntarily. Fun. Fun like 3 days spent in straitjackets, stretching her limbs, stretching them far more than the gymnastics or yoga classes she'd been through in her 24 years on this planet. Fun like learning the different types of tools that could be used to strike the body, and having to learn each one by name and feel, thanking her mistress for the instruction. Fun like the icy cold from the hose and the stinking disinfectant liquid she was bathed in. Fun as the first 2 full days without sleep, while her body was subjected to a battery of insults she had learned to endure without complaint, swallowing her screams and only moaning and crying when her spirit was thoroughly broken. Sherry was learning to obey her captor and even anticipate his wishes. The previous day had been mild in comparison. The burning in her scars and the pain in her joints had subsided enough to be barely noticeable. She wished it would stay that way. "Thank you, ma'am. I look forward to your attention." The gentle kiss on her lips had been one of the most amazing things that had happened to her up to that point. She had been probed, prodded, and punished, but always in an abstract, almost asexual manner. Even during those times when random objects were inserted into her most intimate orifices, it felt less like a pleasure and more like an awkward intrusion. A warm kiss with a caressing tongue running across her lips was completely unexpected. Perhaps not entirely. She had feared from the start that she would be used and abused, but this was the first sign that her initial fears might come true. She felt the cold steel of the collar snap into place, assuring her of good behavior. She never again wanted to experience the torment this simple piece of metal could deliver. She would be obedient. She would be obedient. She would not, under any circumstances, anger mistress. Her wrists and ankles were disengaged from the bed, and she quickly turned and sat up, sliding off the soft surface and onto her feet. Mistress was strangely kind, leading her across the cold tiled floor by touch instead of dragging her by her collar and forcing her to blindly bump into the hard pieces of furniture strewn about the room. Furniture she'd learned to hate. 5 days of blindness had sharpened her senses. She could hear the water dripping in the toilet, the quiet footsteps of the landlady behind her, the coolness of the linoleum beneath her feet, the smell of wood and leather and blood. Sherry was led to the bathroom and allowed to use the toilet. She still felt awkward and insecure using the potty in the dark, but the blindfold was always present and absolute. In a way, she appreciated the blindfold, believing that as long as she couldn't see her captor's face, perhaps she would eventually be released. "I think you could use a thorough cleaning, child," Mistress told her. Sherry braced herself for the sudden stream of icy water. "Thank you, Mistress," she said, bowing her head. "I want you to close your eyes tightly. I'm going to take off your mask now." "Yes, ma'am. I will not open them." The cruel chuckle sounded ominous. "Surely not if you hope to ever see daylight again. I prefer the mask. With drugs, there's always a chance your sight won't return, and of course, the agony of blinding renders a slave useless for days." The mask was peeled away from her head, and she felt the sticky glue stretch as it was torn away. The secondary patches over each eye slowly peeled off, then quickly peeled away like a band-aid. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, and then she squeezed shut. The room was almost dark, and for that short time she could see nothing but the bare concrete wall in front of her. Sherry ran a cool cloth over her eyes and temples, removing the last remnants of glue. Then a new cool bandage, less soft and slippery to the touch, was placed over her eyes. "This is temporary for cleaning." "Thank you, mistress," Sherry replied, genuinely grateful. The old eye mask was annoying. Sweat and tears stuck to the inside of it and made it rough to the touch. Another pleasant surprise came when the eternal restraints were removed from her wrists and ankles, along with the most evil of devices, the pain collar. She rubbed her wrists where the leather bracelets were rubbing her. Sherry felt the warm water cascade over her skin and let out an involuntary moan of pleasure. "Don't move, dear, while mistress takes care of you. Stretch your arms out in front of you and lean against the wall." "Yes, mistress." Sherry felt a large, rough washcloth, probably natural, rubbing against her skin. She could feel the slippery soap spreading over her body. Its scent was soothing. She stood still, resting her hands against the wall and spreading her legs a little wider than shoulder-width apart. She liked the roughness of the washcloth and the warmth of the water washing away the soap and sweat. Mistress scrubbed everywhere, lifting her legs to reach the soles of her feet. The loofah traveled between her legs, under her arms and across her breasts. When the sponge touched her intimate places, she tensed slightly. But those places were treated the same as all the others, thoroughly washed but nothing more. She was surprised at herself. For the first few days she had argued, fought, begged, and pleaded. Thoughts of the evil that would be done to her flashed through her mind. Images of endless men using her, studying commands, unable to stop them, helpless to resist. She was thinking up ways to free herself and take revenge on the evil woman who held her captive. Over the past couple days, many of these thoughts had receded into the background, and she was simply looking for ways to survive another day of pain and discomfort, waiting to see what would happen next. The pain had become manageable, the discomfort something that could be tolerated for hours, and the brief respite something to be treasured. Moments like these, under the warm embrace of the shower, were a gift. Don't dwell on what could be next. Don't dwell on what has passed. Accept what is happening and be patient. And do not anger mistress. Never make mistress angry. Her long hair was gripped in her mistress's hands, and she could smell the floral scent of shampoo and the achingly familiar sound of liquid being poured from the bottle. Fingers massaged her scalp and carefully scrubbed her golden brown locks. She had feared the jailer would cut her hair if it interfered with her punishment, but mistress seemed to like it just the way it was, and had even brushed it a few times during her captivity. Her hair was washed for a long time until she heard a squeak, indicating that all traces of shampoo were gone. The water was turned off, and she wiped herself with a soft towel, drying quickly. The towel was draped over her shoulders, the only material that had covered her body for the past 5 days. She pulled it close and enjoyed a moment of normality. Her hand was grasped, and something was put into it. "Now brush your hair, and thoroughly," Sherry obeyed, struggling to pick her way through her newly tangled hair, but after a few minutes she managed to drag the brush through without difficulty. She continued brushing, savoring the familiar simple motion, and glad that she could delay what was ahead of her for as long as possible. "Hair is such a nuisance, isn't it?" mistress said. "It's part of your surprise today." Sherry flinched at that hint. Perhaps it was just another tease. Would she really end the morning bald? Another cruel and pointless punishment. She didn't know whether to answer or not, so she remained silent, convinced that being told to answer carried far less punishment than saying the words out of order. Sherry felt her ankles buckle again, and wondered if she should break free and fight back. For once the collar was off, and she was free from all restraints. Would she be able to do it? Would she dare? The answer was simple enough. No. She had no idea if there was a way out of this room, or if the mistress had that vicious stun gun handy. She didn't dare risk angering mistress. What would she do if she did get angry? Sherry shuddered at the thought. As those thoughts raced through her brain, the handcuffs changed again, and finally the steel collar was back on her thin, sensitive neck. "Close your eyes tightly, dear. I've prepared a new blindfold for you." Shiri felt the temporary mask removed from her eyes and a new, soft one placed over her eyes. It was wide and would not let any light in. The edges of the mask were pressed down, and she felt the glue fasten the fabric around the edges. "Come, child, we have a lot of work ahead of us." Her mistress led her across the room, where she was asked to lie on the padded table, on her back. Her brain was already working overtime, thinking up possible shameful and painful scenarios. Her wrists and ankles were secured, holding her securely in place. Hands peered into her bosom. She felt fingers run through her coarse hair, gently pulling at it. "No, that won't do. I'm sorry, child. This might hurt a little." Shiri almost choked, trying to contain her laughter. Did it hurt a little? This coming from the woman who had rubbed canes, straps, rods, paddles, and whips on her back, ass, chest, and legs. "You're so transparent, sweetheart. Yes, I'm sorry I caused you accidental pain. Disciplinary and educational pain is a different matter, and that's why you can scream if you're hurt without fear of reprisal." Shiri felt herself being stroked, heard the hum of the electric razor cutting hairs and the warm oil. "Thank you, mistress. Just as you wished. Thank you for your kindness." She relaxed, for once not worrying that a blow for a mistake, imagined or otherwise, might follow at any moment. She silently prayed that the hair between her legs would be shaved off just this morning. The wax was warm against her skin, and she braced herself for the expected pain. Shiri felt the cloth pressed against her skin and pressure along its entire length. Mistress pressed down on one end and with a quick movement separated the hair. The pain was sharp and intense, and she struggled to hold back a sigh. In light of what she had been through 2 days earlier, it was almost a relief. She felt herself start to giggle and suppressed a chuckle. She thought she would be left naked, but felt mistress slowly work a small section of hair left for decoration. A series of searing pulls pulling large sections of hair changed to more precise pulls, each time removing less and less of her natural forest vegetation. "That's better," mistress purred. Mistress spread her thighs wide, lubricating her labia with the warm liquid, while her fingers slid her labia apart and apart, exposing the hairs that were enveloped in wax. A few more movements, and Shiri decided she was done. Mistress had other ideas. She continued the procedure anew, careful and deliberate, fishing out the last drops. It was almost painless, quick, and to the point. Another half-dozen applications, nothing more than a slight burning sensation, and mistress applied the cool lotion to her bump. The straps on her hips were removed, and the restraints on her arms and ankles were released. "That's not all. Now get on your knees and lift that sweet ass up." Shiri did as requested, quickly adopting a pose that had previously meant bruises for her poor, defenseless rear end. She had learned to hate this position. Mistress spread her cheeks, and she felt the warmth of the wax spread across the slit of her innocent ass again. The soft fabric seemed intrusive, pressing, descending, coarse against her sensitive skin. She tensed and sighed as the fabric was almost painlessly torn away. Several more products had to be applied to the creases and crevices before mistress was satisfied with the result. Shiri's skin tingled as if she'd been spanked. A spanking, exactly, not a beating. Over the past few days, she had come to realize the difference. "So beautiful, so perfect," mistress whispered, rubbing the lotion into her slit. Her hand lingered, stroking her, making her squirm, ashamed to be pleasured by these gentle touches. She felt her body betray her, responding to the sensual caresses. Could this be just another tease before the serious beatings began again? "You have a delightful figure, dear girl, so round and full, so smooth." Mistress continued to caress her, running her finger over it. "What do you feel, child? Tell me honestly." Shiri sighed. I like it, mistress. Thank you." She knew they had been watching her for a while now, judging by the comments when she first arrived. They hadn't been shy about talking about her being captured. They knew where she went and when. They knew her schedule and knew when she went on vacation to pick her up when no one would miss her for a while. Knew where she parked, grabbed her, and dragged her into the damn van. The beginning of this hellish captivity. It's been 6 days, including today. No one would miss her at work for at least 3 more days. She lived alone, and had been for quite some time. No hope. No, mistress. There's been no one for almost a year now. What a shame. A body like yours is a magnificent temple. You need to be loved, hard and often. Oh, I don't know, mistress. Shiri knew that answer wasn't enough. I've never done it, she admitted, suppressing a groan. To give or to receive? Neither, mistress. The words came harder and harder, the fingers in her body distracting her. Really? The hostess looked concerned. That's hardly acceptable. Do you hide your mouth from your lovers? Yes, mistress, she admitted, both embarrassed and angered by that admission. Disgraceful. Wasteful. That's going to change. Yes, mistress. She tried to deny it again, but she was afraid of the possible results. Mistress seemed to have a sixth sense when it came to lying. Please, mistress. Yes. Just don't hit me again, she thought. Mistress, she shrieked. Come on, baby. Beautiful, she heard as the blackness receded, and she became aware of her surroundings again. Gasping, she slowly lowered herself onto the table until her trembling legs failed her. What was happening to her? She was enjoying this far more than she should have, desperate for release. Sex was to be tolerated, but not like this, never like this. Her mistress sat beside her and ran her hand down her back, soothing her. The second phase of training has begun. You will remain obedient and respectful. Do you understand? Yes, mistress. All right. If I find a reason to punish you, I won't be soft this time. I expect more from you, and we don't have much time to prepare you. You will obey me completely, won't you? Completely, mistress. Good. Let's go then. And so it began. Madam was right. This phase was even more grueling than the previous one. Throughout the day, she found herself in dozens of positions, forced to endure the penetration of various devices even more varied than the instruments of pain. Large and small, narrow and thick, hard and pliable, smooth and textured, she took them all. There were few moments when one tool or another didn't penetrate one or the other, straining her to the limit. Even at meager mealtimes, she tolerated a large plug. By the end of the day, she was completely exhausted. She begged for a rest. Dear, dear child, you've done a good job. You deserve your rest. Mistress bathed her again and then laid her on the bed. She applied a soothing balm. She removed the collar and applied more of the wonderful cream to her neck and shoulders. As Shiri lay there, feeling the cooling lotion do its work, her captor brushed her hair and then carefully braided it, all in silence. Shiri was given painkillers for the first time, and she drifted into slumber. Her life had already changed beyond recognition. Shiri awoke to the caresses she had grown accustomed to. Good morning, child. Another day of classes awaits you. She cleared her throat, testing her voice. Good morning, mistress. Educate me. Her throat was still scratchy, her voice sounding rough. Mistress chuckled. Can't wait? Gladly, mistress. What did I tell you? Mistress asked. There was no anger in the woman's voice. Shiri tried to find the right answer and was shocked to hear a different voice. Everything you said and more. Thank you so much for including me. Does Robert know about her? Came a new voice from the opposite side of her bunk. Mistress hissed, Names, Ivory, names. The new man moaned, I'm sorry, Scarlet, I forgot. One more slip-up like that, and our guest won't be the only one in training today. I won't forget again, I promise. There was concern and remorse in the newcomer's voice. Shiri was as nervous as she had been the first day. It wasn't so much the presence of her new captor, but the unexpected tone of Mistress's voice. The same flat sound as the first time. A frightening sound. Frightening. She tried to sit up, forgetting that she was still restrained. Take it easy, child. I'm not being polite to you. Don't be nervous. Yes, mistress. Mistress and the newcomer both worked on her ankles and wrists, quickly freeing her. Shiri spread her legs apart, sat up and slid off the bed to face her captors. She needs cleaning, her mistress said. May I? Cleaning is everything. Yes, Scarlet. I'll be attentive and careful. Go ahead then. They grabbed her arm and pulled her along, ignoring her stumbles and awkwardness, hurrying her through the maze of furniture blindly. Her foot hit a sharp edge hard, bringing tears to her eyes and an involuntary hiss between her lips. "Damn it, Ivory! Take it easy. If you hurt her, I swear I'll pay you double." Sherry crashed headlong into her guide, who stopped suddenly. She faltered as her guide stepped aside. "I'm sorry, Scarlett. I'm so sorry. I'm just so excited. Look at her." "No excuses. I thought you were better prepared. You disappoint me." The hostess's voice still sounded harsh, without any sympathy for the newcomer. Sherry's hand was tightly clenched and she was pulled forward. "Be careful," the woman whispered angrily, pulling her slower behind her. After a few more steps, they stopped, and she heard the water in the shower turn on. She heard the rustle of clothes next to her. Her shin ached where she'd hit the table, but the pain was minor, less than it had been in the mornings in her new prison. Sherry was pulled forward so that the water was up to her waist. Ivory's hands reached up and removed the mask from her eyes. She quickly closed her eyes, bowing her head in fear. The kidnapper began to remove her restraints. "Oh shit, are you bleeding? Shit." Sherry squeezed her eyes shut, while the newcomer's hands rubbed the wound on her shin. "It's not that bad, just a little scratch. It doesn't really hurt, does it?" "No, mistress." With the restraints removed, Sherry was pulled under the water, and she heard the shower curtain being pulled back. This was interesting. She didn't know there was a curtain. "Not mistress, no. Don't call me that. Ivory is fine, or ma'am." The giggle that accompanied the new instructions was unexpected. "Yes, Ivory. And now you can open your eyes. It's okay." Sherry cautiously opened her eyes, and the dim light hit her eyes, making them squeeze shut. She kept her eyes partially closed and squinted, gradually getting used to the piercing light. After a few seconds, she was able to bear it more, and through her tears, she saw her new guardian standing in front of her. She was wearing a simple white mask, and she was smiling. "How's that?" asked Ivory. "That's very nice, ma'am. Thank you." Ivory giggled, then moved behind her back and began soaping Sherry's body, the washcloth pressing roughly against her skin. "You are beautiful. I have never seen such a beautiful slave girl." Slave. Those words were like ice picks digging into her brain. She was their slave, their absolute slave, and there was nothing she could do about it. She tried her best not to scream, biting her lip. After a few seconds, she pulled herself together again. "Thank you, Ivory. You're very kind." Sherry threw her head back and let the water beat against her face, washing away her tears. The washcloth and clinging hands moved to her, and she looked up at the girl who was washing her. Ivory was appropriate. Her skin was alabaster, almost translucent, with light blue veins showing on her neck and chest. Her hair was platinum blonde, probably natural, shoulder length. She was young, probably still in her teens. Sherry wouldn't be surprised to learn that she was still in high school. What kind of people were these people who let teenagers do things like this? Ivory's washing took on a new hue as the sponge disappeared and her hands began to rub and caress, touching Sherry between her legs. The girl's mouth slid upward and took. The girl stood in front of her, took Sherry's hands in her own, and placed them on her small breasts. "Okay, your turn. Wash me." "Yes, Ivory," Sherry said quietly, surprised to find that she was enjoying holding the girl's breasts, unconsciously squeezing her nipples. Looking around, she saw a soap dispenser on the wall, pressed it a couple of times, and soaped her friend up. Reaching down, she picked up a washcloth from the floor and began rubbing the girl with it, creating a washcloth and cleaning her thoroughly. That feels good, slave girl. Nowhere to miss." She spread her legs in invitation. Sherry moved over to the girl and washed her from front to back, making sure Ivory's intimate areas were groomed. Kneeling down on the hard tile, she wiped the girl's legs down to her feet and moved around her new captor until she was on her knees in front of her, her neatly trimmed blonde crotch a few inches from her face. As she brushed her other leg, Ivory reached down and pulled Sherry's head between her legs. Sherry gave in to the pressure and kissed the plump lips in front of her as she brought her foot to the end. "Use your hands to make sure I am well rinsed, sweet slave." Sherry rinsed her hands under the running water and ran them over the pale girl, touching her gently, mesmerized by the feel of the smooth skin. She continued to kiss the nearest flesh with her mouth, making sure there was no soap left on it. "We're going to have a lot of fun tonight," Ivory said quietly. "Thank you, Ivory." "You're welcome. Here, don't move. Let's get those braids out of your hair." She pulled Cherie to her until she stood up, then moved behind her, and the girl's small, delicate hands quickly unbraided her braids. Her fingers were nimble, moving quickly and confidently. When Cherie's hair was loose, she felt the shampoo on the top of her head, and the girl brushed her long hair, taking her time, pressing her body against Cherie's back, leaning closer. "Rinse it off," Ivory said. While Cherie rinsed her hair, Ivory straddled her full breasts, squeezing and playing with them, while her lips explored Cherie's back and neck. "I suppose it's clean enough?" came the voice of the landlady nearby. "Yes, Scarlet, we're just finishing up," Ivory echoed. She walked past Cherie and turned off the water. "Don't move, okay?" "I won't, ma'am." Once again, Ivory giggled at being called ma'am. Cherie faced the wall and heard the shower curtain move behind her. A moment later, a large bath towel was placed on her shoulders. "Go ahead and dry yourself off, but don't turn away from the wall," Ivory said. "Yes, Ivory," Cherie replied, wiping herself dry and checking her shin for the first time. There was a bruise, but it had already stopped bleeding. As far as bruises went, there would be more than one. Wiping herself off, she looked at the spot where Mistress had cut her hair the day before. A small mop of heart-shaped hair was all that remained of her previously uncut bush. She smiled at it. It looked nice. Cherie dried her hair with a towel. When she was done, she stood still, waiting for instructions. She felt a touch on her scalp, slowly running it through her tangled hair. "Thank you, Ivory." The laughter startled her. "If I let her brush your hair, you'd probably be half bald before she was done." It was Mistress, Cherie realized with surprise. "Oh, come on, Auntie. I mean, Scarlet, I'm not that bad." The brush caught in her hair, then tugged sharply. "Out! Go sit on the bench by the wall and don't say another word." The words were spat out in sharp anger. Cherie started to turn, but Mistress put a hand on her shoulder, holding her in place. Ivory whimpered nearby. "Please, Scarlet, forgive me. I'll be good. I promise." "Not another word, Ivory. Go on. I'll decide what to do with you in a minute." The brush resumed its tireless work, unraveling the tangles in Cherie's hair. "Forgive me, child. I should have known better. She's not ready for this." Cherie didn't know whether she should answer or not. She tried to find something to say. "She is young, Mistress." Scarlet laughed in surprise. "Yes, that's true. But she should know better. What can you do? Kids these days. In my day, I'd have been scared to death of making the slightest mistake. I think we've been too easy on her." Cherie remained silent, hesitant to voice her opinion. "On the other hand, you, my child, are a treasure. I hope you realize that. So obedient, so responsive, so eager to obey." Mistress stopped brushing her hair, and Cherie felt lips on her shoulder. "Thank you, Mistress. I apologize for being so impertinent in the beginning." "Oh no, girl. You weren't like that at all. I may have continued the discipline longer than necessary. I'm not perfect either." She hummed to herself and went back to brushing Cherie's long hair. After a couple minutes, she stopped, then reached out and put the mask over Cherie's eyes. She pressed it into place and Cherie felt the glue sticking to her skin and holding it tightly in place. She was shocked to see that the mask was mesh and she could see through it. "Just a little reward, dear. How's that?" "All right, ma'am. Thank you." "Great. Why don't you use the restroom? There's a toothbrush and mouthwash by the sink. When you're done, come to our house for breakfast." Cherie was completely confused. This day was starting out so differently. She turned away from the wall and looked around. It was like looking through a dark mosquito net. She could make out everything around her, but everything was somehow fuzzy and hazy. She found her way to the restroom and was surprised to find that she was embarrassed. When she was completely blind, there was nothing wrong with peeing in front of Mistress, but now she was a little nervous. Not wanting to anger Mistress, she quickly did her business, then brushed her teeth and rinsed herself. She turned to head towards the table where they were eating and froze when she heard a familiar sound. "Oh, please, Scarlet, I'll remember," the girl's cry echoed around the room. Another loud smack of the paddle against her flesh, and the girl cried out again. "Damn it, Ivory. Show some self-control. Girl, come here." Shiri turned from her intended path and headed toward the horse, over which Ivory was leaning, picking her way through the maze of furniture. "No, please don't let her hit me," Ivory pleaded. "Don't be a fool," the mistress bellowed angrily. "Go, child, take your stand." Shiri nervously moved over to Ivory and leaned against the horse, spreading her legs for stability. The padded horse was long and could probably take another penitent at a time. "Is that so, mistress?" "Exactly. Count 5. Shiri felt tears come to her eyes. She hoped the punishment was over. She hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, from the beginning, she never did. "Yes, mistress." The paddle came down quickly, making her jerk. Even after days of punishment, the jolt from the first stroke was still unexpected. "1, mistress." The second blow was angled upward, across her cheeks, and very hard. She barely contained her displeasure and pulled herself up on her toes. "2, mistress." The next 3 blows were not as scary as the second, and came quickly as she counted each one down. After the 5th, she felt her body relax. She didn't cry out and barely moved after each blow. She had learned better. "Thank you, mistress. See? That was twice as hard as you got, and not a sound. Not a tear, not a single scream. Did you see how she held on?" "Yes, Scarlet. I'm sorry. Now don't fidget or whine, understand? Or your day will be over before it starts." "Yes, Scarlet. Child, you may come to the table." Shiri stood up and turned away. "Wait." Shiri stopped, wondering what she would have to endure next. She saw the vague outline of her mistress approaching with an oar in her hand. She shuddered in anticipation. Mistress took hold of her head and pulled it forward. Her lips met Shiri's and her tongue pushed them apart. Shiri obediently opened her mouth, and when Mistress kissed her gently, instead of dominating her, she sighed and returned the warm, wet kiss. "I'm proud of you, child. Thank you." Shiri's heart jumped in her chest, and she almost reached for her mistress, stopping her hands in the air. She quickly lowered them and nodded. "I'm happy I didn't embarrass you, mistress. Thank you." Mistress chuckled. "You were going to touch me?" Shiri bowed her head, and feeling her emotions overwhelm her, whispered, "I'm sorry, mistress. I was going to hug you." Scarlet moved closer, just a few inches. "It's good that you stopped, isn't it?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I'll take my punishment." "That's the way it's going to be, you impertinent child." Shiri tensed and gasped, finding herself in her mistress's embrace. "Come on. You have my permission. You can hold me." Shiri raised her arms and wrapped her arms around her mistress. Leaning forward, she pressed her breasts against her captor's chest and nuzzled her head into her neck. She smelled of soap and arousal. She held her tightly against her, and her hands moved only slightly, stroking the skin beneath her. Her mistress was caressing Shiri's still heated cheeks with her free hand, and the wooden paddle was pressing between her shoulder blades. Daring to do so, she pressed her lips to Mistress's neck, tasting her. The hands holding her relaxed, and she began to pull away. "Did I say you could stop, child?" Shiri froze in place. "No, mistress. I believe you can hold me better than this. Come on, show me." "I think that's enough." Mistress's voice sounded strange. Shiri stood up. "Thank you, ma'am. You are too kind." Shiri was shocked. She quickly sank to her knees, lowering her head. "Oh no, no, mistress. I would never do that." The hard paddle was under her chin, and she flinched. She raised her head, resisting the pressure of the hard wood. She lifted her head and looked up at her mistress, trembling. "Go sit at the table and wait for us." Shiri jumped to her feet and hurried to the table, hearing the first slap of the paddle just as she sat down. 1. Much better. At least it looks like you can learn. 4 more, and we'll be done. And maybe you'll think twice before you speak out of turn. "Yes, Scarlet." 2, the girl shrieked loudly, and Shiri heard her mistress sigh. She almost wanted to laugh. The silly girl was completely out of control. She sat quietly, listening to the new girl receive her punishment. "Now pull yourself together, and when you're ready, join us." Shiri saw the woman walk over to the table and sit down next to her. What a child. If you can't take the punishment yourself, how can you expect to be able to take it? How can you know the limits? She poured them each a glass of orange juice and began buttering the toast and spreading jam on it. You show more self-control in a week than she does after almost a whole year. God, I'm too easy on her. Shiri was surprised by the woman's words. Mistress, may I speak? She laughed sardonically. Sure, why not? It's that kind of day. You understand punishment so well, making me go over and above what I thought I could handle, but stopping just before my collapse. You had to. Have I been beaten? Sure. More times than I care to remember. Worse than you can imagine, child. Of course, it's part of my training. Now go ahead and eat. Ivory walked over and sat down across from her. Thank you, Scarlet. I'm sorry I disappointed you. I'll try harder. I know you will. Now apologize to our guest. It was your carelessness that caused me to use her as an example. I'm sorry, Cherie. Cherie heard the dishes clinking next to her. Jesus, Ivory. What the hell is wrong with you? Did they teach you to address interns by their first names? Shit. I'm sorry, Scarlet. I forgot. What am I supposed to do with you? I can't believe that after your punishment, you still can't follow simple instructions, and you still swear. I'm so sorry. It was an accident. I promise it won't happen again, Ivory whimpered. If I didn't have such a busy schedule, muttered Scarlet. When this is over, you and I will have some unfinished business. Mistress reached out and placed her hand on Cherie's arm. You will no longer call this girl Ivory or ma'am, understood? Yes, mistress. You will address her as girl or trainee or even slave if you wish. She's no better than you, and you, trainee, will you address this girl as first girl, or let me see, what should I call you? Cherie wasn't sure if she was being addressed directly, but answered anyway. As you wish, of course, mistress. Truth, how about Amber? It matches your beautiful hair. Thank you, mistress. Ivory wasn't so happy. Really? You're not seriously going to put me below her, are you? Come on, Aunt Jean, be reasonable. Enough, growled the mistress, standing up and pulling Ivory away from the table. From what she could see, it looked like Scarlet was dragging her by the hair. Cherie felt ashamed of her. The girl had been so stupid and careless. No, please. Cherie heard the intern yell, and felt a little embarrassed that she smiled. She finished her toast and orange juice and sat in silence until the hostess returned. That's going to complicate things, but I guess we'll have to adapt. And you, young lady, forget everything that little bitch was too stupid to keep to herself. Did I get that right? Yes, mistress. It is forgotten. I swear. Great. Now let me finish my breakfast. Cherie waited, but after a few moments, she saw the mistress stand up. Damn, this was supposed to be a good day. Cherie stood and waited in silence. Mistress stood beside her, running her fingers through her hair. Okay, Amber, we can't let this interrupt our training. Our time together is almost at an end, and we still have so much to do. Shall we get started? As you wish, mistress. The hostess headed across the room, and Cherie followed her. They made their way between the furniture, and Cherie shuddered involuntarily as she recognized the cross to which she had been tied for most of the day. They stopped at the table where the intern, was lying. She was lying on her back, her hands handcuffed and bound at the ankles, her knees raised high. The girl was making unintelligible sounds and the gag made her mute. The mistress pulled Cherie to the bench, looking at the girl who only minutes ago was supposed to be helping her with her training. Now it was looking more and more like she was the one who was going to be trained. Tomorrow, Amber, is an important day, a very important day. We will be hosting a guest who is very fastidious. You will be on your best behavior and do everything in your power to make him happy. Do you understand? Cherie shuddered and nodded her head. Completely, mistress. I will not disappoint you. She watched with rapt attention again as mistress ran her fingers through her hair. No, I don't believe you will. But he's used to experienced women, and you came to me completely unprepared. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's not your fault, child, and we've made excellent progress, but you're not quite ready yet. A pathetic demonstration like last night, when you almost got sick because of me, won't do. It won't work at all. No, mistress. Train me, please, so I won't disappoint you. He might want to share you with men and women, and he'd be upset if you didn't live up to his expectations. You wouldn't like it if he got upset. He can be very harsh in his punishments. I wouldn't want that for you. You wouldn't want that, would you? No, mistress. I will do my best. I know what you want. However, your experience with women is quite limited, isn't it? I have none, mistress. Exactly. So, our trainee will give you pleasure, and you will learn from her. Afterward, you will show me what you have learned. Can you do that? Shiri was already getting knots in her stomach. Using and sharing with a stranger? Serving women? To women? She felt sweat break out on her. She tried to speak, but couldn't. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Amber, you're going to be perfect. Trust me. He will love you. You can do this. For me. Do it for me? She shuddered, then nodded her head. Yes, mistress. I will not fail you. I will obey him completely, and do everything in my power to make him happy. For you. Mistress stood in front of her and kissed her gently. I know you will be. You will be perfect. I know it. Come. The hostess, Scarlett, took her by the hand and led her to a part of the room she had never been to before. She stood on a thickly padded platform and walked to the middle where the hostess told her to lie down. She stretched herself nervously. A few minutes later, the trainee was led to her and knelt between Sherry's legs, hands linked together. Let's start with the basics. Trainee, I'm going to remove your gag now. If you say one word or let me down in any way, I will beat you to a pulp. Do we understand? Shiri watched the girl nod vigorously. Feeling a hand on her breast, she gasped and turned her head to see Mistress prostrate beside her. Relax, Amber. Let her pleasure you. Don't get distracted. Her lips then nestled against hers and she kissed her fiercely. Good. That was a good start. Did I? Began Ivory. Not a word. Shut up and sit over there. You were hardly adequate. Don't piss me off again. Ivory crawled aside and sat motionless, obeying. Mistress stretched out beside Shiri, beckoning to her. Come on, Amber. I can't wait any longer. I hope I don't disappoint you, mistress. I'm sure you won't. I'll give you a referral to help you if you need it. Don't be alarmed if I do. Thank you, mistress. Leaning forward, Shiri followed the order Ivory had taught her. Oh, Amber, that's so good. Her mistress kneeled down and moved closer. That was wonderful. You are a quick learner, child. Thank you, ma'am. I'm glad I didn't disappoint you. Scarlett chuckled. Disappointed? Hardly. They took a short break for lunch, but the sullen intern complained about her treatment, and she was gagged and punished again. Shiri felt sorry for her. The girl was so lacking in discipline. Nothing to do with the mistress. After lunch, she was taken to where the trainee was still bent over the horse. Mistress removed the gag from the trainee's mouth, warning her not to speak out of turn. I'm going to let you choose. Either I will punish you or Amber. Which do you prefer? Amber, please, the girl pleaded. Child, you will spank her with your hand. This provides the most immediate feedback. 20 strokes, please, and spread them around. Do not make it easy on her, or I will finish the job for you and give you the same. Understood? Yes, mistress. Shiri was torn. She didn't want to hurt the girl, but she knew mistress would be hard on both of them if she didn't do her due diligence. Drawing on her own experience, she gave the trainee a good spanking until her hand was red hot, and the girl's cheeks and the tops of her legs were bright red. Ivory seemed to be learning and counted down the strokes without wiggling too much or crying out more than a couple times. We don't know what our guest expects of you, but it's best to be prepared for all eventualities. Let's put this on you for the next lesson. Exhausted and in pain, the three women took turns caring for each other, applying soothing balm, with Mistress and Shiri receiving massages from the penitent trainee. Scarlett, I've learned my lesson, Ivory said softly, massaging Mistress. I don't need to be an intern anymore? If you've learned your lesson, why are you talking to me? Scarlett sighed. Aren't we done yet? I'm not sure how long it will be before you're done. Now be quiet. She turned her head and addressed Shiri, who was relaxing beside her. We did the best we could. You did a good job today. Thank you, mistress. I know I'm not ready yet, but I promise I'll do my best. I know, I wish we had more time. I could teach you a lot, but tomorrow's a big day. Just do your best." "I will, ma'am. Thank you." Over a light dinner, they discussed the training they had received. Sherry was surprised that she was treated almost as an equal. The hostess explained some of her guest's preferences, discussed his predilections and habits. Mistress sighed. "It's been a long week, Amber. We've done the best we could. Get some rest today. Tomorrow will be very busy. One more day of good behavior, and your little vacation with us will be complete. I'm sure that's good news for you. Happy you're done with us?" Sherry blushed. This week had been excruciating, but at the same time, the most exciting week of her life. Nothing like the dull 9 to 5 hour existence of her daily life. At first she was scared for her life, but now she was scared that it would all end, and she would go back to the boring routine of her previous life. The landlady laughed. "Poor girl. You'll never be the same again after this. You don't have to go back to your old life, you know. Your life is your own." "Yes, ma'am. It was an eye-opener." "You bet." Ivory picked up on that. "That was pretty intense. Next time I'll drive a car." Mistress sighed. "You've been so good. Unlike our little helper. You speak out of turn. Punish her for me, will you? It's been a long week, and I'm tired." "Yes, mistress. Thank you, mistress." Ivory couldn't leave it at that. "You're kidding, right? You're not going to leave her in charge and let her beat me, are you? If you don't learn to obey and learn self-control, I don't know when you'll see anything but these four walls here. I hope I don't have to get my friends involved to train you properly." No, Scarlet, please. You don't have to." Sherry got up and stood next to the intern. "Let's get this over with. This has been very tiring." She pushed Ivory down. "On your hands and knees. Get your ass up. Quickly." Ivory quickly moved into position, lowering her shoulders to the floor. Sherry knelt down beside her and spanked her a dozen times, then switched sides to use her other hand, as the first one was hurting so badly. A dozen more strokes, and she was done. "That was well done, Amber. Come on, intern. Let's let our guest get some rest. She has a big day tomorrow." "Good night, mistress. Thank you for today." "You're welcome, child." Sherry jabbed a finger at the girl beside her. Ivory took the hint. "Thank you, Scarlet. I'll try to be better." Her hosts headed up the stairs, leaving Sherry alone. The first thing she did was remove the stupid mask she'd been forced to wear all day, replacing the constant shadows with harsh fluorescent light. Feeling truly free for the first time in days, she decided to take a long, soothing hot shower. Everything hurt that she didn't even realize she had. Even more sore in places she didn't even realize she was sore in. Stretching out on the soft floor, she checked her sore spots. Her back, her legs were almost fully recovered. They were still sensitive in some places, but mostly they didn't bother her anymore. The day had given them no respite, and she gently massaged them, soothing the pain. Sherry lay back down and stretched, her mind racing. She couldn't relax, thinking about everything that had happened to her and what was likely to happen. Closing her eyes didn't help. The bright light was highly distracting. She rose to her feet again, looking for the light switches, and found them at the top of the stairs. Unable to resist, she reached out to check the doorknob. It was locked. No surprise at all. She turned off the light and saw that the lights were still on downstairs. The night lights. At least she wouldn't be stumbling back to her bed. She didn't know what to do with herself. She had been kept awake for hours on end, and she was exhausted both physically and mentally. She knew she should be sleeping, but she couldn't turn her brain off. Every night, Mistress kept her awake until the wee hours of the morning. She only had to sleep for a few hours at a time. She smiled. Tomorrow would be a big day. "Good morning, sleepyhead. Did you have a good rest?" "Like a child, Mistress." "That's good. Are you ready for your big day?" Sherry looked around. Mistress was kneeling beside her, reaching out and running her fingers through her hair. Sherry shook her head, enjoying the sensation. Mistress was dressed. A burgundy teddy and a scarlet mask covering her eyes. "Isn't that right, Mistress?" "I sincerely hope so." "Educate me, Mistress." Scarlet laughed. "Dear Amber, your training is complete. This morning is a little rest and preparation. I need you to get up now and clean up a bit. When you're done, put on your mask." "Yes, Mistress." While she was tidying herself up, the landlady approached her. "Here, we need you to wash yourself thoroughly. Do you know how to use this?" Sherry took the proffered object. The plastic bottle had a narrow nozzle, pre-lubricated. "I think so, mistress." "Okay, the other one's on the sink." Shiri finished her thorough cleansing, took her time, wiped herself down, and put the mask back on. She slipped back into the shadows and cautiously made her way to the breakfast table. She marveled at how comfortable she had been all these hours. She realized that she had lost a few pounds in the last week. The light meals and activity had done what endless hours of Pilates couldn't. After a light breakfast, Shiri was surprised to find that the quiet and obedient Ivory had joined them. Together, Ivory and Mistress made her lie down on one of the tables and gave her a long massage, applying lotion to the last fading bruises and scars and adding some light makeup to cover up the last marks. When she was done, she was given an outfit to try on. She squeezed into the tight red slip dress, letting her assistants make the necessary adjustments to make it fit properly. The silly outfit made her feel more exposed than naked, and after all, she practically was. The few ounces of material nothing more than underwear. "This is perfect. You're going to be a hit," Mistress exclaimed, making her turn around. "What do you think, Ivory?" "Wonderful. I'm so jealous." "You don't have to, dear. Your time will come." "Promise?" "Soon, Angel." Her hair seemed to last forever, and her nails were manicured, and her feet pampered. For a moment she giggled, so vivid was the contrast between her current situation and those first terrible days. "Something funny, Amber?" asked Mistress from her seat beside her, where she was also being taken care of. "What a difference a few days makes, Mistress." "Oh, we're thinking about our first meeting, aren't we?" "Some. I hope you won't take offense at me." "Mistress, I will have against you whatever you wish or allow." Mistress laughed in turn. "You see, Ivory, you can learn much from our courteous guest." Ivory was on the other side of Mistress and was working on her transformation. "I don't doubt it, Scarlet. Thank you for including me." "I think she's influencing you, and for the better. It's a shame her stay here will be over soon." Shiri didn't want to think about it. Another night of total submission, of doing whatever she was told, of giving herself completely, trying to please her mistress and everyone else she asked, including the guest, especially the guest. They broke for a small lunch, and Shiri was used to light meals and small portions. She had been hungry the first couple of days, but now she savored every bite, savoring the taste of fresh fruit, light salads, savory cuts of meat. After lunch, they returned to the preparation room. They were left alone for a few minutes, and Mistress, apologizing, replaced Shiri's mask with a new, completely opaque one, plunging her into total darkness. For the first time in days, she felt nervous. The blackness brought with it a feeling of utter helplessness. She didn't have to think long. The next visitor came, and she was forced to remove her clothes. More waxing was done, and makeup was skillfully applied to her face, breasts, and even between her legs. She was itching, longing for longer touches, feeling the need for attention. "Patience, dear. How are you feeling? Does it still hurt?" "Not much at all, Mistress. It's hardly worth mentioning." "I understand. Believe me. The last few days have been really hard." "Were they ever?" Ivory said quietly, stammering suddenly. If I may say so, Scarlet." Mistress chuckled. "Yes, dear. I know it was hard for you too. I hope you learned something." "Yes, Scarlet, thank you." Finishing her makeup, she slipped back into the dress, once again adjusting it where necessary. The hostess had brought a can of spray adhesive to keep the dress in place, especially the top of the heart, which tended to pull away from the skin and flutter a bit. A new pair of red shoes with 4-inch heels completed the ensemble. His flight should already be in place. The driver should be picking him up any moment now. Time is running out. Time to put the finishing touches on things. "I think we're ready. It's time for everyone to take their seats." Sherry was led out of the room and into the main hallway. They turned right toward the entrance as she remembered. The hostess stopped her and led her to a kneeling position, where she knelt on a raised padded platform that reminded her of church kneelers. "Now bend fully downward, extending your arms toward the door. Straighten your hips and lift your butt. That's it. Perfect. Hold this position for a moment." It wasn't a very comfortable position, but of course there was nothing particularly difficult about it, and she remained seated with her arms outstretched and her head bowed. She felt her mistress lightly adjust her hair, unraveling it, and then she heard the sound of heels approaching. What do you think, Ivory? This is the best thing ever, Scarlet. Just amazing. I hope Robert thinks so. He will be devastated. You can sit down now, Amber. Relax. When our guest arrives, I'll let you know and you can return to this position. Yes, mistress. Nervous? Sherry nodded. Not much, mistress. I hope I don't disappoint you or our guest. Honey, I don't think it's going to be a problem. Just do the best you can. Can you do that for me? Of course, mistress. I promise. Great. Now hold still. Mistress reached through the hole in the back of her dress and grasped the device. They're pulling up, Scarlet, Sherry heard Ivory say. Positions. Faster. Sherry quickly assumed the pose and felt Mistress's hands position her properly from behind and parted her hair once more. Arch your back down a little and keep your ass raised. Good. Perfect. She sighed. Amber, honey, you're going to break his heart. The clatter of retreating heels caught her off guard. When the echo of footsteps faded, she realized she was alone. She heard the door open. Robert took one last look in his pocket. The ruby earrings had taken weeks to design and create. Each one was almost 2 carats, flawless. They would be perfect for Jean. He'd won this time. He knew she would love them and was looking forward to his well-deserved reward. She was always especially gracious after these trips. He was a lucky man. He opened the door, heralding his presence. I'm home. Robert set his bag down at the entrance and turned to go inside, and froze. An amazing sight appeared before his eyes. A woman was kneeling before him, her strawberry blonde hair seductively arranged. The girl's full, round cheeks were a perfect heart shape, the point of which went all the way down to her waist. He felt his own heart beat in response. Robert stepped forward, catching his breath and looking around for the rest of the family. He slowly walked around the girl who waited for him, silent and motionless. From behind, she was almost irresistible. He could already feel himself reacting to her. He reached out and gently ran his hand over her bare cheeks as he continued to assess. A small shiver from the girl made him smile. He finished his circle, stopping in front of her. He was dying to see what she looked like. At first glance, her body was perfect. Smooth, round ass, narrow waist. He leaned over and slicked her hair back, encouraging her to lift her head. A red satin mask covered her eyes. Her little upturned nose was painfully cute, and her perfect crimson lips were begging to fall into his mouth. They didn't have to beg long. Stand up, girl. On your knees, please. She rose slowly. He studied her for a while, noting the signs of restraint around her neck. She had recently been wearing a collar, probably for a long time. What had Jean been up to? He leaned over and ran his finger over those charming lips. And who are you? Amber, if it gives you pleasure. Did Jean put you up to this? Mistress Scarlet has prepared me for you, master, as a gift. A gift. A terrific one. Take your stand if you want to, Amber. Yes, master, she replied softly, reaching forward again as gracefully as possible. He heard heels clacking on either side of him. When he opened his eyes, he looked around and saw Jean and Terry approaching him, dressed to match. Caught like a child running his hand into the cookie jar. He grinned. Happy Valentine's Day, sweetheart, said Scarlet. She leaned over and kissed him. Happy Valentine's Day, Uncle, Ivory replied, leaning in for a kiss. Her lips lingered, her mouth slightly open, her tongue squeezing between his lips. Her soft hand ran down his chest. He wondered how much longer he could resist her seduction. Jean made it clear that the time was not yet right. He thought that maybe today would be the day. It was a fantasy he had indulged in on the flight home. The gift had spared him the urgent need to get hold of his wife's conniving niece. Now he was in no hurry. That's enough, Ivory. You're distracting him, Scarlet reminded the teen, then leaned over and spread her captive's cheeks, giving her a great view of his thick poll disappearing into her. What do you think of your gift, Master Steele? You spoil me. Best Valentine's Day present ever. He laughed, pulling out and entering that sweet new toy again. It was too good to stop, and he began slow movements, going in and out of her, her sweet pussy accepting him more and more willingly. You have no idea. 2 virgin holes hungry for pleasure. Completely, totally yours for the night. You'll owe me for this. Who's that? Asked Robert. puzzling over which of their friends might have saved this lovely item for a rainy day. Scarlet seemed reluctant to tell the truth. I kind of captured this one. We have to release her tomorrow, but she's at your disposal tonight, Master. It's only a week. It's okay. We were careful. No one will miss her. She was born for this, a natural. When I saw her, I knew I had to get her for you. She's perfect, isn't she, Master? Robert sighed heavily, pulling himself from the innocent victim. He stepped around her and helped her up to her knees. Amber, you are a beautiful, incredible gift. Painfully beautiful. My conniving wife knows my preferences all too well, but I will not impose myself on you, no matter how tempting it may be. I am yours, Master. Your gift. Please, I don't want to disappoint you or Mistress. Enjoy me. You don't know what you're saying, girl. Please, teacher, I understand everything. Tomorrow I will go back to my old life, the constant dreary 9, 5, too much TV, dinners alone, and an empty bed. Today, I am a fantasy, your fantasy brought to life. Mistress has worked hard to prepare me for you. Let me be whatever you want me to be, whatever you need. Don't turn this week into a waste of time. Use me, enjoy me, Master. Don't leave me like this. He stroked her cheek, and she turned her head, devilish lips capturing his finger and sucking it in. The desire of this innocent pawn was undeniable. He closed the last inch and pressed his lips to hers, kissing her, gently at first, then increasingly demanding. Finally, he pulled away, moved his head to her head, and nestled his mouth against her ear. Thank you, Amber, for this gift. I accept it. He pulled away, giving her another look. I give a once-in-a-lifetime gift. Just this one time. It's amazing. Please return to your seat, he told her softly. Sherry lowered herself back down and reached up, wiggling her ass invitingly. Robert suppressed a giggle. Impatient little girl. His smile quickly dissipated. This was really going over the top. The girl had been prepared all week, and he could understand her need for him. He would gladly fulfill that need, but he would not forget how she had come to him, and he would make sure she was taken care of. Scarlet and Ivory stood silently waiting to see how his unexpected actions would turn out. Scarlet realized that this was a big deal. She had gambled and won. The obedient Amber had made it possible. She felt a warmth for the girl that she hadn't expected. She reached forward and gently stroked the girl's back, realizing she would miss her. Robert returned to his original position, his hand slowly stroking the steel rod. Scarlet, had been wrong to act this way. They had made a deal. There would be consequences. He paused for a moment before sinking back into his present, then turned to his niece. Get me ready, Ivory. Robert turned to Scarlet and nodded toward their willing captive. Get her ready. Scarlet realized that Robert wasn't just a little angry, but sensed that her action would have serious consequences. Already, she realized that the days of holding Ivory back were likely over. She hoped the consequences wouldn't be too severe. She knew that her only salvation was the gift. If the girl turned out to be everything she had imagined her to be, Robert would be in too good a mood to be disappointed in her. Scarlet studied hard, sincerely hoping that one short week would be enough. She was perfect. How could he let her go? Damn that troublesome wife. He grabbed the girl's hips, pulled back, and thrust into her with force, taking her, claiming his prize. Did she want him? Fine, she would have him, completely and thoroughly. He would make this night one they would both remember for the rest of their lives. Shiri took a breath, slowly getting used to the huge invader and feeling excited to be put on display for her mistress and her new master. She realized that a lot depended on her here, and she was determined to play her part. She would be perfect for him. She gasped as he began to enter her again, filling her in the most amazing way. So much better than those toys. She pushed back against his insistent thrusts, wanting more, letting him know how much she needed it. Footsteps sounded near her head, and she felt someone moving in front of her. She knew from the intoxicating scent that it was her mistress. Yes, she may have been the gift, but she was also the recipient. Best Valentine's Day gift ever. This story plays with the deep, complex, and perhaps contradictory emotions and motivations of its characters. Shiri, or Amber's journey through this ordeal, is framed by layered questions about freedom of choice, degrees of approval, and the notion of consent in the face of extreme pressure. Watching her transformation woven into the network of relationships with the characters of Scarlet and Ivory reveals a dramatic contour of psychological dynamics, from submission to self-assertion and perhaps even self-sacrifice. The complex relationship between dominance and submission is prominent in this story, as are the moral issues it raises. It forces the viewer to consider the boundaries of the moral and ethical dilemmas facing each of the characters, and how each of them makes choices with specific consequences at some point. The themes of consent and self-control that are interwoven throughout the story force us to ask questions about power and responsibility in human relationships, and how deeply an individual's true desires and needs can be hidden beneath external pressures and expectations. This story unobtrusively reminds us of the importance of understanding the psychology of human relationships, and how important it is to seek understanding and justice in all settings, even when faced with difficult moral and ethical choices. As a reminder, the full uncensored content is available on our Patreon, where we can dive into a more detailed analysis and in-depth understanding of this story and its characters.